I'm Bradley Anderson, and this is Joker and the Fool. This is Western Oregon University, and this is the lecture on cheap laughs, the smug satire of liberal humorous debases, our comedy and our national conversation. And the guy who wrote this guy was named Christopher Hitchens. And fair warning, I have, for some reason, my whole family is texting me, so I'm having trouble keeping all of this quiet. So, let us begin. I'm going to start with some definitions, just to remind you, because Christopher Hitchens talks about a couple, three different things, and it's useful to know what they are. So, for example, he talks about being witty, and witty is showing or characterized by quick and inventive verbal humor. So, witty is always verbal humor. Funny is just causing laughter or amusement or being humorous, not necessarily with words. Um, and the distinction he makes between being witty and being funny has to do with the amount of wordplay and cleverness he uses in his in Franken's books, as opposed and his deliveries, performances, as opposed to other things. Witty is primarily focused on verbal. Irony, if we remember, is the expression of one's meaning and using language that normally signifies the opposite of things um, related to sarcasm, typically for humorous or emphatic effect. Or it's also a state of affairs or an event that seems deliberately contrary to what one expects and is often amusing as a result. And then a new word is bathos, which is the unintentional lapse from the sublime into the ridiculous. So I want to start by parsing this sentence that's in Hitchens' essay. He writes that Baudelaire wrote that the devil's greatest achievement was to have persuaded so many people that he doesn't exist. Liberal platitudinousness must be a bit like that to those who suffer from it without quite acknowledging that there is such a syndrome to begin with. And more vocabulary. A platitude is a flat, dull, or trite remark, especially uttered as if it were fresh or profound. And so, what he's really saying here is that liberals think they are funny, but instead they are dull. And he spends his entire essay making fun of not so much the performances of these people, but the books, especially of Al Franken and Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart. I have to say that I included this essay because I wanted to have something that wasn't overtly liberal in the essay and that criticizes a liberal humor. And I think he does a good job of that. However, he is poking at some of my heroes, and so that's where I'm coming from here. And honestly, this essay isn't funny, is it? There's some snarky remarks, but he doesn't try to win us over with his own humor. He is much more persuasive than that, or tries to be more persuasive than that. But aside from snark, I didn't find this funny. Maybe it is funny, and I'm just not the kind of person who finds it funny. But anyway, I wanted to put that out there, the bias that I know that I am approaching this with. Because I'm liberal and I think I'm funny, but there you go. Here we go. Okay. So, one of the things that he puts forward is that ironic or satirical news helps its readers or viewers feel smart about subjects they might not know much about. So, this essay is focused on political humor and focused on fake TV news shows. Before this survey that he talks about, so 2008, the Pew Research for People in the Press reported that when asked in a poll to identify their favorite news anchorman, a comedian showed up at number 4 in the list. That's Jon Stewart joined the likes of Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, and Walter Cronkite in The American Mind. It's a fake TV show. So that was in 2008. I mean, it's a fake news show. In 2003, I think it was. If I were a good person, I would have looked it up. Someone else did a poll and asked where people got their news from. And number one or number two or number three, again, was The Daily Show. Or late night television. It was what The Daily Show was, the late night television shows, talk shows. And Jon Stewart looks into the camera after he reads that and he says, "Don't do that. We make stuff up." So there's all sorts of things packed into this. You know, what is entertainment? What is news? Is news entertainment? Is news entertaining? What is the place in the world for a satirical news show? But how does ironic or satirical news help its readers feel smart about the subjects they might not know about? Well, first, it informs them a little bit about subjects that they do know. That informs them about the subject, so then they do come away knowing more about things. I watch regular news, but then I also watch a lot of these late night TV talk shows because they do provide information, and that is comparable to the stuff that's put forward in straight news shows. They do it in a much more entertaining way. But the other thing that it does, that it's a little bit different than feeling smart, is feeling cool. On page 205, Hitchens says, audiences who laugh not only because they find something to be funny, but to confirm that they are cool enough to get the joke. So if you hold an opinion that, say, George Bush is a dummy, and then the fake TV news show anchor says, "Hey, George Bush is a dummy," you're like, "Ha ha, I know, George Bush is a dummy." You feel smart, you feel cool, because you get the joke, you're with the in crowd. And this is one of the things that comedy just does. Comedy just groups people together. We can laugh at this one thing. It creates a community. It's one of the things that comedy does and why it's popular. And so that's automatic. That's kind of an automatic thing. You feel smart because you're cool enough to get the joke. Actually, kind of all comedy does this. You feel smart because you're not the butt of the joke and you get the joke. Other things. Let's talk about impressions. I've got two different impressions here of two different presidents done by one's Key and Peele and one is Saturday Night Live. And we'll watch all of Key and Peele and part of Saturday Night Live because it's that one's longer. But then I'm going to talk about these impressions and these political commentators given this doing this kind of satire. So here we'll start with Key and Peele, and yeah, it's classic here. All right, so that was one. And so here is the other one, and I'll play, this one goes on for a while, so I'll play like 2 minutes of it. All right, I'm stopping it there. So we have these two, arguably these are both liberal franchises, Key and Peele and Saturday Night Live. But let's take a look at exactly what these two clips are mocking, and what is the political context for the joke. So with Key and Peele, Obama was very low key, maybe not in person, but on stage. You know, as a politician, he was dang near unflappable, super low key, and seemed to have, you know, one setting, which was adult. And so here they're making fun of the fact that he must be angry about stuff. He just refuses to show it, and or maybe he can't show it, and so therefore we need to translate it into that. And by the way, belatedly apologize for the swearing. I literally could not find a clean version of this clip. So I swear like a sailor, and so it doesn't bother me. So I apologize if it offended anyone. But anyway, so here we have, and I inadvertently chose these two clips that are, basically contrast the two presidents' personalities, because here's the criticism of Obama, that he doesn't tell people what his accomplishments are. And so the first thing that the clip of uh, Trump is that he does tell everybody about his accomplishments. So there's that. So we have the criticism is that this character of Obama is unable to express himself, and so they have someone who can do it for him. What are the criticisms that they have of Trump here? Well, first, he does toot his own horn, the very first thing, and then he makes friends with dictators who Key and Peele do call out, but completely opposite. They say, "We're going to get you, dictators," and Trump says, "I'm going to go have dinner with the dictators." So, so they point out his the fact that he was chummy with some of the dictators, and then of course then they started yelling at each other, and just the contrast in the personalities, and then the fact that he his great line, he says, "You don't have to be dumb to love the wall, but it helps." So the comics are mocking their personalities and their deliveries, and some of their in this one, in Trump's, they're mocking his policies, not so much in Key and Peele. So the political context for the joke. In this one, this is obviously pre-pandemic, and the political context is that that Trump declared a national emergency so that he could get funds and to start building the southern border wall, because every other attempt that he made to get funding for it was thwarted. In this one, the political context was that after a year of being in office, or 2 years, I forget exactly when this was first done, Obama was making accomplishments. It must have been 2 years, because after that, after the first couple of years, he couldn't do much of anything substantial anymore, because the Republicans took back the House and the Senate, and Obama was unable to pass most of the stuff that he would like to in the way that he wanted to. That's what the Tea Party dig is. And so the fact that I have to explain this one more because it was made, let's say, between 8 and 10 years ago, probably, and especially since most of you are 18, 19 years old, and we're not probably watching these TV shows or paying attention to politics, is telling. I probably have to explain this less, because this was merely 3 years ago. And maybe you were paying attention. But the fact that I have to explain the context, comes into this, informs this next question. Do these sketches have a lifespan outside of their political moments? Because humor is contextual. And some humor is not. Like slapstick is not as does not rely on context as much as political humor, especially. We're going to watch a film version of the Lysistrata in a week or two, which is a Greek comedy. And we still watch this play because it is very sexy and funny and crude, and that stuff still plays. However, it is also a scathing political satire. But everyone who it's making fun of has been dead for 2,500 years. And unless you have a degree in Athenian politics of the time, you won't know what the jokes are. And so here, it's hard to uh, it's hard to see these things being funny for much longer, because there's so much of let's see, the political parts are not going to be funny for much longer. Making fun of the fact that Obama is low key, that could be funny for a while. The Anger Translator is a beautiful bit. And making fun of the way that Trump speaks might be funny for a while, because uh, because of the way that he speaks, is mocked so beautifully uh, by Alec Baldwin there. But the political humor, once the context is gone, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like the essay that we read, The Cheap Laughs here, was written in 2009. So that was 11 years ago? 12 years ago? Yeah. And I lived through it, and I only vaguely recognize a few of those names. And so if you felt lost reading about Al Franken, fear not. It has lost its punch because it's lost its context. Finally, since I brought up Al Franken, let's talk about Al Franken. Personal opinion, I don't know how to feel about Al Franken. And this is the God's honest truth. So Al Franken's ironic career end. He was on Saturday Night Live for years. He's the one who, he was a writer, and he was on the show for years, and it was one of the original cast members, and one of the original writers. And he's a brilliant comedian and super funny, and his political humor was spot on. And even Hitchens here has good things to say about Al Franken's political humor. Said he would have voted for him, and because he's well read and intelligent and smart and all that. But then he was elected to the Senate in 2008 for his state of Minnesota, I think. I forget. Oh, I'm sorry. But then in 2017, so the year after Trump was elected president, okay, for context, Al Franken was accused of sexual misconduct by many women, starting in 2006 and going forward through his time as a senator. He was accused of tongue kissing someone on stage who didn't really want it, and maybe that was in rehearsal too. There's a famous picture of him in the belly of an airplane, hovering over a female comic with his hands sort of over her boobs, not touching her, and then mugging for the camera. That was the 2006 thing. And then there was accusations of him inappropriately hugging or taking pictures of people and accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, touching their butts, this sort of thing. And he was pressured to resign by his party before he was able to appear before the ethics committee to give his side of the story. And when he resigned, he pointed out the irony, and this is irony, that President Trump was still president and was elected president, despite the infamous Access Hollywood bus tape where he is recorded saying things, oh yeah, you can just grab him by the insert kitty cat word here. When you're famous, you can do anything. That, and that's the least of the accusations against former president. And that was released a month before the election. So the irony here is that nobody accused Al Franken of paying off a stripper, or cheating on his wife, or doing things like that. And a number of people who pressured him to resign did so, and then regretted it. They have said publicly that they regret it. So that is ironic, given that we have a article about Al Franken saying that, well, he's not really all that funny, and then having him ironically having to end his career for doing things that he thought was funny and that were not funny. That's about all I have to say about this. This is not a funny piece, but it is about funny pieces, and I've got some exercises that we'll do in class to see if we can use what's in here in a way that helps us make sense of things. I also had a slide, by the way, of what about conservative comedy, but I threw it out because honestly, I think the same things can be said about conservative comedy, because the same things can be said about all comedy. Alrighty, dighty. Thank you very much, everybody.